That's it.
Thank you. Dr. Blanchett.
How are you? My name is Dr. Raymond H. Ruffin Blanchett. I am the pastor of the Revelation Pilgrim Ministries Apostolic. I am the Bishop General Secretary of United Churches for Kingdom Building and the Executive Chairman of the Clergy Campaign for Social and Economic Justice. So I want to begin my testimony by talking about the fraud of this legislation in order to pass environmental legislation. It is a fraud on the city of New York, and the city council understands that it is a fraud. They understand that how they wrote this legislation is problematic, and they understood that it was problematic when they did it, which is why they wrote the legislation in the way that they did it. I had conversations with council members, several council members, over the last 2 months with reference to this legislation. And basically, what my dialogue with them was, why are the city of New York does not have the ability to charge a tax. Mm-hmm. So why are you now imposing a tax on consumers? So in order for them to get around it, what they've done is they decided not to call it a tax. They decided to call it a fee. Not only are they calling it a fee, but what they could have done, they could have said, well, we have retailers that are making a lot of money already. We could now, the same way BJ's or Costco's or the other retailers that are out there, they've established different business models for them to be able to say, well, we're not going to use plastic bags anymore. We'll use cardboard boxes, and then we leave it to now the consumer to make a determination of how they're going to transport their goods. Instead, what they've done, they didn't want to impose the quote-unquote fee on the retailers because the retail lobby was a lot stronger. And they knew that they would come at them with full force and they would never be able to pass the legislation. So what they did was they imposed a tax on the most vulnerable members, the most vulnerable members of our civil society, and said, well, now for every bag, and this is not just on plastic bags. This is on both paper and plastic and on every one that's used. And so now you have to pay 5 cents, and it's a minimum of 5 cents on every plastic bag that you use. Now, in the audience, we have here Eli Amsel. Eli Amsel is a small business owner in our community. He's an employer. And Eli Amsel has done a tremendous job in employing people in Southeast Brooklyn. So, and he has people from all walks of life that now work in his establishment. So you have a situation where his business is now in jeopardy because you have individuals that are now let me turn that around. The members of the community are in jeopardy because a city council who was supposed to be progressive has made a determination that the voice of the poor doesn't matter anymore. And that is something which is very, very, very dangerous. That every time you turn around, that now you want to impose legislation that you think is going to improve the community, it's now on the backs of the community. A community that didn't have any say so. They didn't have any, by no stretch of imagination did they cause the problems that plastic bags are now causing on our environment, but now they're the ones who now bear the burden to try and fix it. That is tremendously problematic in terms of the thinking and the intent of the city council. So I would like to, begin, and just to really focus on why the city council wrote the legislation in the manner in which they did. And as state senators, I want you really to consider this, that their intent was to circumvent going to the state legislature. That was the intent of how they wrote this legislation. It has nothing to do with environmentalism. Because, and that's why I go back to Eli Amsel. What Eli has educated us and showed us is that there are different gauges of plastic bags that you can use. What is to stop retailers from now saying that we're going to take the lowest gauge plastic bag? So now, when you put your product in those plastic bags, now the bags will break, right? So now we have to sell you more plastic bags. We have to double bag, triple bag, and you have more plastic bags. And so they're making money off the consumer. You're talking, I mean, and you now have retailers that are going to make more than $500 million a year on the backs of the most vulnerable in our community, on the working poor. How can that be allowed to happen? How can you now say that you are going to allow legislation that's going to take money out of the pockets of the poor and give it to the rich? How is that possible? Why would you now say that because we have a problem with the way this legislation is written, why would you now say that we have a problem with the way this legislation is imposed on the backs of the poor, that now we're anti-environment? Why would you now say that, you know, well, we're giving you reusable bags? You cannot tell us that these ends justify the means. You cannot say that this will not increase the number of plastic bags that are now being used. Because as Bertha Lewis has brought up over and over again, you have now people in our poorest communities within NYCHA who is by virtue of the infrastructure, the same way the city of New York, the streets were not built for the number of cars that we now have, which is why we have the congestion that we have. Within the NYCHA buildings, they have these small compactors, and you can't use the large, hefty trash bags that we now use to. So they use the bags for a dual-use purpose. They bring their produce home, but they also use those bags to be able to dump their garbage. So now they have to bear another burden in addition to being charged 5 cents per bag, right, from unscrupulous retailers, which will charge them more money for it. Now they have to spend more money because now they have to purchase plastic bags just to dump their garbage. We are not helping the environment with this legislation. What is beyond that is now you have a situation that now says, if I go and I buy 1,000 plastic bags, there's nothing that prevents me from buying 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 plastic bags. I can now take those plastic bags and throw them in the air, and they're all over the place. There's nothing that prevents someone from still taking that plastic bag and littering or destroying the environment. It has no net impact on the environment. What I asked the members of the city council, I asked Lori Cumbo, I asked Jamani Williams, I asked a number of members, even Margaret Chin, who when I had the conversation, she wants to run away. She wants to have the conversation. The most progressive city and the most progressive state in the United States, why is it not possible that we have a dynamic recycling program that exists within the city of New York? We started a composting program, a dynamic composting program within the city of New York. Why not? Because the bags are 100% recyclable. 100%. Why cannot now we engage a program within the city of New York that allows us to recycle those plastic bags, and have them have a dual use or come back to life in another way and have a net impact against against pollution, against litter on the environment.
Doctor, if you can,
It's
me.
He's
if you could
irritated.
just, Stan, if you can sum it up, because we have other panels and maybe some of the senators want to ask some questions.
Well,
thank you.
I'm going to sum it up this way. The city council clearly understood that what they were doing was wrong. They clearly understood that in order for them to get away with doing what they were wrong, they imposed that burden on the poorest among us. They knew what they were doing. When they had the final vote, they knew that that final vote was so divisive that how would it be possible that you can bring a consensus in the city of New York and educate people in the way that they needed to be educated so that we can really have the true effect on the environment that we want them to have. My admonition to the state Senate and to the New York State Legislature as a whole: impose legislation that stops the city of New York from ever doing something like this again. Never allow them to take advantage of the working poor. Never allow them to write legislation that actually hurts the poor among us. If we are going to benefit the environment, we must do it together. You do not make the false choice that it's either the working poor or it's the environment. It's the working poor that must live in this environment. Either we do it together or we don't do it at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Horniman?
Thank you, and I appreciate all the panelists being here and for your work on this issue. It was mentioned by the first gentleman, the company Novolex, and I've heard something about them, read about their involvement at the city level. For those who don't know, for my colleagues who don't know, they're the largest manufacturer of plastic bags, $2.3 billion company, 6,000 employees. They're heavily involved in overturning plastic bag laws across the country, and in fact have funded a campaign in California for a November referendum that would overturn a state law that was passed last year. I just wanted to know if any of the panelists could shed some insight into their involvement at the city level, and if anyone here has a relationship with them, for the record. I think it'd be important for my colleagues to know.
I surely don't have a relationship with Novolex, no.
We do know that, and what the commissioner did not say, and what some of the council people that sponsored this bill did not say, is that Novolex came to them and said, let's do a pilot program and figure out how to change your machinery, that we could save money, do recycling, and do a pilot program to do that. And because there is a single company, Sims, that does all of our sanitation. No bid, by the way. It is not a minority company, which I take issue with. And so it said, well, listen, you can have more jobs. We want to prove to you that you can actually do this. And so what I know is Novolex went ahead and did this and said, at our own cost, because we need to come up with some sort of compromise. And didn't matter. It was an exercise in futility. The money was spent, and it did not matter. When when TBI first heard about this, back in 2014, some of our members who are in the projects and in predominantly of color neighborhoods said, "Oh, Bertha, you know all about this," and I'm like, "No, I don't know anything about it." So I began to go around as TBI, because we do research, and I began to go around and look at the issues. We actually knock on doors in our neighborhoods and found out, well, who does this? Who manufactures them? Where are they? What are they? What can we do? So I wanted to do a campaign. Nobody, would deal with us because, when you look at the environmental movement, it's not too colorful, to put it another way. And so we were dismissed. So I went and I started calling. I called everybody I possibly could. And I found it. I found that company, Novolex, and I said, send me everything that you have. I found folks that had been working for them in other cities and And so I purposely went out to find all of the folks who did this. So that's how I came into knowing them and knowing who they were, and actually pushed them to spend money to do this recycling program and maybe come up with a compromise. But of course, the die had been cast, and nobody wanted to listen to us because we were accused of being bought.
That's right.
You know, because since we're people of color and we're so ignorant, we just go about and people give us 30 pieces of silver and we just say whatever. So, and the proponents of this bill, you know, that's their tactic. That's what they do. So it just shows you but we could never get any real data out of them or anything. So in my testimony, you'll see I kind of paraphrase our great orator Malcolm X, because this, you know, New Yorkers have been hoodwinked. Mm-hmm. They've been bamboozled, and the mayor and the city council have run amok. So you can say whatever you want to say about me. People have called me Muswart's names, but it just goes to show you how this worked. And I knew that question would come up. So thank you very much, Senator.
Senator Savino?
Thank you, Senator Prasad. First of all, I want to thank the four of you for your testimony, because it served not just as an eye-opener for the effect of this policy and what it will be on real-life, everyday New Yorkers, but also because it was somewhat of an object lesson in civics. This is a policy that has been described as irritating many times, and one of the things I think that irritates our good colleagues in the City Council is that from time to time that they forget that in this democracy of ours that they are in fact a creature of the legislature.
That's right.
And good policy works best when we are all involved in the policy-making decision, and this is one of those. I find a lot of parts of this policy disturbing and inconsistent. And one of the things that I find most disturbing is the inconsistency in and of itself. Again, it's some bags in some stores and some are, it just makes no sense whatsoever. And I also find the idea that those of us who are poor, but not all poor. See, if you're on public assistance, if you have a SNAP benefit, it's almost as if you have to show your SNAP card like a scarlet letter to prove that you should not have to pay this 5 or more cents. So I really think that we need to keep discussing the inconsistency, the offensive parts of it, to achieve a solid environmental policy that works for all New Yorkers at all income levels, in all neighborhoods, in all sectors of our economy. And again, I want to thank you for the fight back. I understand the criticisms. Believe me, I've been attacked myself. There are some of my friends in the environmental community are accusing me of being in the pocket of the plastic bag industry. I didn't even know there was such a thing until last night when I got an email, but so be it. That's the business we have chosen, as they say. But thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you.
And I'm very grateful that for once, Senator Felder, I prayed to God. I knew there would be some issue one day that you and I would be on the same side.
I don't know. I don't know why that. I think there are many issues. But I appreciate you coming and testifying, the whole group.
Thank you.
Senator,
Senator Golden?
Yes, please, thank you. I, too, want to thank you all for being here today and for your testimony. This is definitely more regulations for small business. It's an impact on small businesses. It's an impact on the family, the children, our seniors, communities of color, our poor. You name it, it's an impact on them. Senator Felder has a on-site webpage that goes after stop the tax, right? Stop the bag tax. And if we can get that in paper form as well as on the computer so we can get more signatures, so we can lay 1 million signatures and give those signatures out there so that they can have them when this is actually tested in the courts in October, and it will be, because it's a definite end run around the state legislature on increasing a tax and putting a tax on small businesses here in the city of New York. So I'm sure this will be tested in the future, and it's a definite end run. A tax is a tax is a tax.
It's a tax.
We're not going to get away with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. May we have City Councilman Lander?
Thank you all very much.
Good morning. I just want to ask you to do the same thing I've asked of the other witnesses. If you could please not read,
Hello, Councilmember.
just tell us what's on your mind. Please, and thank you for coming.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me, Chair Felder, senators, assemblymen. It's always good to see you. It's good to see you when we agree. It's good to see you when we disagree. As you know, this is a dialogue we've been eager to have, and I do want to just go through and, at least on some things, correct the record, help you understand what's real about what we did, what's real about the process that we had, what's real about the law, what's real about our goals, as you know. And I saw Assemblyman Heikkinen holding up my Hamodia op-ed. We've been trying to have this conversation in every single community, and I do think I'll just start there. We spent 2.5 years working to develop this policy. We did dozens and dozens of bag giveaways, town hall meetings, community conversations. I think it is important to know a majority of members, not just a majority of members, a majority of members representing low-income communities, a majority of members of color of the city council voted for this. We had a many hours long hearing at which dozens and dozens of people testified, including some of the people who are in the room today who aren't on the panel list. And we then went out in every neighborhood. We've talked to thousands of New Yorkers about it. We assembled a coalition of not just environmental groups, community-based organizations, from the Rockaways to the Bronx, park cleanup groups, public housing residents organizations, environmental justice groups, because all our solid waste goes through a series of neighborhoods on trucks. We did extensive research on the law. Anyway, I'll come back to a few of those things. So, look, the goal here is pretty simple. It's to get people to bring reusable bags when they go shopping. That eliminates the need for wasteful plastic and paper bags. And evidence from over 100 U.S. cities, from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles, from Austin to Minneapolis, hundreds more, and then many more countries. This is in England, in Germany, in South Africa. They do it now in Israel. And what the evidence shows in city after city, country after country, is that the vast majority of New Yorkers, of every race, of every income, of every age, of every family size, of every ideology, of every neighborhood, will switch to reusable bags and avoid paying the fee. No one wants to pay the fee, and the good thing is they don't have to pay, and we don't want them to pay. We want them to bring reusable bags. And so let's just take one step back. I'm not sure, but I hope we can all agree that plastic bags are a problem. Are they the world's biggest problem? They're not the world's biggest problem. They are a problem. Each one by itself doesn't really seem like that much, but 9 billion of them add up. That's 91,000 tons of solid waste, 19,000 bags a minute. It takes the equivalent of 7,000 truck trips through our neighborhood to take those things to landfills, and we pay $12.5 million. Along the way, we see them in the storm drains, in the trees, in the streets, in the parks, and the beaches. They are a real problem. So the question we looked at is what to do about it. We spent 2.5 years of research. We looked at policies all around the country. We talked to people in those cities all around the country. We brought on an expert, Jenny Romer of plastic bag laws, who knows more about this than anything else, and I'm sorry she's not on a panel, because honestly, if you want to know the most about what bag laws are around the country, how they work, how they've been litigated, you have that expert right here in this room, but unfortunately she's not on your panel list, so I don't know if she's even going to be able to testify today. Our hearing was open. Everyone who wanted to testify was able to testify. We stayed for as long as it took. We had some fantastic young people as well. I hope you'll look at some of these videos at cafeteriaculture.org. Students of every race, of every income, of every religion, speaking about why they care about the planet. And the diversity of the coalition was very real, too. You have here, not just the big environmental groups like NRDC, although I see they're not on the list, but Citizens Committee for New York City.
Is there anyone else that's not on the list?
I have a list of people that aren't on the list.
So if you want, just mention them all at once.
Sure. Eric Goldstein from Natural Resources Defense Council, Peter Kostmeyer from the Citizens Committee for New York City.
he is submitting testimony in written form.
Okay. We let everyone.
Disinvited yesterday.
We let everyone. I don't. We let at our hearings. You do your hearings how you do your hearings. At our hearings, we let everyone who comes and signs up testify. That means we give people shorter time.
That's true.
So that's just Diana Blackwell, who's a public housing resident leader. Folks like Rolando Guzman from Outrage, Eddie Bautista from New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. Anyway, I could keep going. I'll stop. But it is true that a lot of our coalition is low-income and working-class communities, people of color, and again, a majority of members representing low-income communities and communities of color voted for the bill. So let me just go through a few of the things. I think the recycling point is an important one, so I want to tell you the truth about it, okay? Because I'm confident I spent more time looking at the question of can they be recycled than anybody who has spoken so far. Novolex approached me through their lobbyist. I took a meeting with them here. I then they asked if we could set up a meeting with Sims, which I arranged. So we went out to Sunset Park, we met with Sims, we met with Novolex. That was the second time. We talked about the process of evaluating the recycling. We went on a couple months process together where a bale of plastic from Sims Recycling, which I would encourage you to visit as well. It is very illuminating to see the tons and tons of plastic waste that they have there. They sent a bale of it out to Wisconsin, where Novolex had bought and now owns a plant. They got the research, they wrote it up. We came and met in my office and went over it. So it's the opposite of true that we ignored it. What's true is at the end of all that research, so I said to Novolex, great, you're claiming that your plant in Wisconsin could recycle this plastic. Does that mean that you're prepared to work with someone to set up a plant here, anywhere on the eastern seaboard? And their answer, and you should just ask them honestly, was no. And I said, is that because it's not economically feasible? And they essentially said, without millions of dollars in public subsidy, it's not economically feasible. And the reason is, unfortunately, the cost of making new plastic from petroleum. Let's remember, it's a fossil fuel, it comes from petroleum. The cost today of making new plastic from petroleum is cheaper than the cost of recycling plastic bags. So is it physically, chemically possible to wash, shred, pelletize, and recycle them? It is absolutely physically, chemically possible. But right now, it's not economically feasible to recycle them. And that's even assuming you got them. I mean, let's be honest. We would only get right now, most plastic bags just get thrown in the garbage. You see them in the street garbage. Those are the ones that wind up on the streets. They weren't in people's home waste anyway. So, recycling, we spent a lot of time looking at this. It's where I started. I actually started thinking, how could we more effectively use those take-back bins? But I think the honest answer is there's no economically feasible way of recycling any significant number of New York City's 9 billion plastic bags. And I would urge you to just do the same process. Go talk to Sims, ask Novolex whether they're prepared to, as an economic venture, to do the recycling. They'll tell you no. So I think that's really everything that you need to know. We did look at the policy alternative of banning bags altogether without placing a fee on paper bags. Unfortunately, that's also not a viable solution. First, it would lead to more solid waste, not less. Paper's a little better than plastic, but unfortunately, most paper bags still don't get recycled after they're used. I don't know if you got a chance to talk to the commissioner about that, but they mostly still wind up in the garbage. That's a shame, but it's true. They mostly still go to landfills. They weigh a lot more than plastic bags. So if you switch everyone from plastic to paper, you wind up with more solid waste, more truck trips, more trash going to landfills, more money the city will pay to landfill them. And you want to talk about what does harm to our small businesses, our supermarkets, our grocery stores. That switch would be deeply impactful, because each paper bag costs 5 or 6 cents more than each plastic bag. You would be talking about billions. You want to talk about billions? It's honestly probably hundreds of millions of dollars of imposed cost on our supermarkets, and we're losing supermarkets around the city. It's not a business that's so lucrative. So we looked at a ban without also putting a fee on paper bags, as they have. That is the policy in California and now Minneapolis and a lot of other places. It'll do more harm than good, unfortunately. I understand why it's appealing, but it just isn't going to work. So the answer is really as simple as people bringing reusable bags. And of course, as you point out, Senator, people used to do this all the time. That's how we used to get our groceries, was in reusable bags. And it's not that hard to do. Every one of us, all of our families, do harder things every day. We remember our keys, our Metro cards. We bring a bag if we go to the gym. We bring briefcases and purses. We bring religious items to synagogue or shul or mosque. We absolutely can become able to remember to bring reusable bags when we go shopping.
Wait for a minute.
No props.
You want to sit down or, no, do you want to sit down or do you want to leave? Because this is not a circus. We have a distinguished councilman, excuse me, a distinguished councilman testifying and you're walking around. Okay, so then leave. Continue, please.
A lot of people already bring a cart. Obviously, if you're going to carry a lot of bags home, a lot of times you have a cart or a car. People that have reusable bags, just leave them in the cart or the car. This is something we all absolutely can do. Now, we can't just pass a law that says you have to bring reusable bags to the grocery store, but every place that they've passed it, what happens overwhelmingly, you know, in D.C., that 5-cent fee has led over 80% of residents across lines of race, income, and neighborhood to start bringing their own reusable bags and reduce bag waste by 60%. San Jose reduced bag litter by 89% in their storm drain system, from an average of 3 bags a trip to 0.3 bags a trip. And the same is true in many, many other cities. And the evidence is just clear across the board. So I guess, and look, while I understand there is very genuine opposition to the bill, believe me, I've talked myself to thousands of people about it. So some people are excited about it, some people are not excited about it. The evidence says overwhelmingly they'll switch to reusable bags precisely for the reason of avoiding the nickel. And this is the thing, the goal is not to irritate people, the goal is to get people to bring reusable bags. That is the goal. And it's not hard to bring reusable bags, but we need a little nudge. And it turns out that the desire not to pay for something that used to be free, the irritation, yes, the desire not to pay that nickel is what helps people. It's quite extraordinary. I mean, I just ask you to look at the data. It is amazing how able people become to bring reusable bags in the places where fees go into effect. If we were first, if we didn't have all that data from Buenos Aires to Israel to South Africa to Washington, D.C. to L.A., it might be different, but we do. A couple of quick sort of pointing out just a few myths. There's a lot of genuine opposition, but look, a lot of the opposition is funded by the plastics industry. They make money selling plastic bags. It's not surprising that they would pay for opposition to the bill. That's how the world works, but there was lobbying. They put a lot of time into it. Bag fees don't harm low-income seniors, don't harm low-income families or seniors. They're just as able as anybody else to bring reusable bags, and the evidence shows that they will. You might think the opposite. You might think rich people wouldn't bring reusable bags because they could afford to pay the nickel, and yet all the evidence says they just as much don't want to pay the nickel, and so rich people are just as likely to bring reusable bags. Senator, I know you've expressed concern about reports that reusable bags have been linked to illness. I'll just say every study that purports to show it has been funded by the plastics industry. Consumer Reports, which I think is as good as you can get, kind of the gold standard of honest, independent research, says that it hasn't been established that that is true. We are still leaving the roll bags, so you can put your produce and your meat for free in the little bags that keep things separate and less likely to leak or be contaminated. Is it a great idea to wash fabric? Sure, you can sponge off the plastic, you can put the cloth bags in the washing machine, just like towels or dish towels or anything else you use. But the fact is there's just no independent evidence that bags have been linked to disease. This point that stores might charge more than 5 cents, I have to say on that one, there are some good arguments against this bill. That one is just plain silly. The stores right now are allowed to charge for bags. They could charge 5 or 10 cents. They don't because customers would go to a different store. And the exact same is true once the 5-cent fee goes into effect. Someone could charge 10 or 15 or 20 cents, but they're not going to because their customers would be angry and they would switch to competitors. And honestly, those small number of businesses that are looking to price gouge their customers and get over on them have a lot easier ways to do it. Just raise the price of the eggs or the milk or the bread. No one even knows. No one would charge more for the bags as an effort to get over on their customers. It's just a kind of a silly argument, truthfully. I want to answer, Senator, your question about application. On liquor stores and on pharmacies, the honest answer is we aren't clear that we can cover them as a result of superseding state laws. That is really the honest answer, that I think we would have been glad to cover them. We did. I don't think it's not a fraud that we spent time looking at what the legal framework we're allowed to act in is, and there are questions given the way the state regulates liquor stores and pharmacies about whether we could charge the fee there, and so we chose not to charge the fee there. I think it would be sensible to do, and when the state gets around to passing a bill like this one, I hope you will cover those. For SNAP and WIC, it is partly about protecting people who are low income, but I'll be honest, it's also partly because your SNAP and WIC transactions can pay for food, and they, in general, don't pay for non-food items, and so you would have to bring cash in addition to your card to pay. So those are the decisions that we made. The goal is to have it be applied as broadly as we can, precisely because we think that everyone is able to and everyone will bring reusable bags. For those people that still want to get the bags, if you use them for dog waste or for lining your trash cans, I will point out you can get them at Costco or online for about a penny each. So you don't have to pay 5 cents. We are confident, if you look, that the vast majority of them are not. Some people reuse them religiously, but the vast majority are not reused. They are used once. They go into the garbage. You see it. People go into the stores. They get a candy bar. It goes in a bag. They eat the candy bar. They throw the plastic bag away barely after they leave the store. So the vast majority of them are not used twice. They're just used once and thrown away. I guess finally on this sort of question of the relationship of what's legal, what'll be tested in court, how we thought about this. We were not seeking to go around you. The state of California, which has the power to levy a tax, which could have decided to pass a law that would have the money come to the state rather than the retailers, chose not to do it. They have the most cities that have already implemented a policy like this, and when they went to a statewide policy, the one they adopted, it's a little different. It does ban plastic bags and put a 10-cent fee on paper bags, because those paper bags, as I mentioned, are more expensive. So they're banning plastic altogether. Now, you can't get them if you want them for your dog waste or your trash can liners, and you have to pay 10 cents for paper bags. And the whole state was willing to do it because they've seen it work in all those cities, because most people are bringing reusable bags. And they did not have the money come to the state for a couple of reasons. First, we don't want the money. That's goal here is not to collect one nickel. The goal is for people to bring reusable bags. And we don't want to get used to that money. We don't want to start spending that money on things that we would want to have. We don't want to collect it. We want people to switch. It's also a headache to track. Like, we had tried to make this as small business friendly as it could possibly be, and making them track exactly how many they did. In DC, they keep 1.5 cents for the store, and 3.5 cents goes to the city. It's a big administrative headache. And our conclusion was, same as the state of California in this regard, the best policy is to require the fee, leave it with the retailers, because the goal isn't to collect the money. The goal is to get people to bring reusable bags instead. So I guess I would just end by saying this. We did go through a very deliberative process. That doesn't mean everyone agrees, but it was 2.5 years. It involved lots of research, lots of dialogue, lots of conversation. We duly passed it with a majority of the city council, and a pretty diverse one. There is, I believe, some appropriate deference from the state to allow cities to do things they're constitutionally and legally permitted to do. Let us try it. It goes into effect October 1st. We're tracking it every year. We've got annual reporting. You'll be tracking it in your neighborhoods. If it doesn't work, if for some reason, even though in every other city and country, more than 80% of people start bringing reusable bags most of the time and don't pay the fee. If for some reason New Yorkers are outliers and refuse to bring reusable bags, and we don't see bag reductions, and instead people are just paying, then we'll come back and fix it. I'd be open to changes. I'll commit to you today. I will take up the cause of reforming it if it needs to. And if I don't, if it goes into effect, it doesn't work, we don't reduce plastic waste, and people wind up paying, and we don't do our job of fixing our law, then that would be the time for you guys to step in and override us. But until then, I would just ask you, give it a try. I think you'll see once it goes into effect, the vast majority of people will not only start bringing reusable bags, they'll realize it's not that hard. They will see the benefits in their neighborhoods and across the city, and ultimately they will come significantly to support the bill. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Council Member. It's always great to see you. You mentioned that the retailers will not, it's a myth that they will charge more than 5 cents. Why are you so confident of that?
Well, this policy exists in hundreds of cities around the country, and there's not one place
talking
where
New
we've
York.
heard that. Well, all I would say is this policy, I mean, there's a lot of cities. So LA and Washington, D.C. are cities that have the same sort of diversity that New York has. There's just not one place that we've heard of where stores charge more money than the minimum required fee. So first, we have lots of evidence of how this policy is working. There's nowhere where that's happened. Second, if they were going to do it, they could do it today. There are a couple of stores. As like Councilmember Chin mentioned, one store in Chinatown that has started charging for your second bag. But so every store is allowed to do it today. If they wanted to make money on their bags, they already could. They don't because it would be
Because the cost is already included in the cost of your grocery.
Well, they price their goods, of course. They've got their whole set of expenses, and they price their goods.
Did you see on the day when you passed the legislation that there was an interview done with some store owners, and one in particular was thanking the city council for doing this because the costs now, the 5 cents that they're allowed to keep, will supplement the salary for them to pay the salaries of the workers. Was that the intent?
Well, first of